Hey Ryan,
Hi, Sunny. How are you?
I'm great. Let me see if I can get you. Okay. I'm great. I've been very busy today. How about you?
That's hopefully a good busy, right? Hopefully.
Yeah, oh yeah. Definitely a good busy for
Excellent.
sure.
I love what you got going on back there. It
Oh
reminds me
yeah.
of your website as you do a little bit of research. I like
Nice.
it's
Okay.
almost like a psychedelic art, if you will, for lack of a better
Well,
term.
there you go. The painting in the large painting in the back was painted by my husband and me together. So
Oh
it's
wow.
um it's very psychedelic actually.
How fitting. That
Yeah.
is that's pretty
We've
sweet.
Yeah, we've been painting together. We actually met in art school, and we've been married for 30 something years, and have been painting together for decades. And we do these huge paintings together, and it's kind of like a form of marital therapy, and it's really fun and amazing. We have a great time together.
That's super cool. All right. Well, I went to school for graphic design. I'm a graphic designer, so same
Oh,
ballpark,
sweet.
but a
Nice.
little different. I can't paint for Jack. I mean,
But you
those are
could
pretty
design like
awesome.
no other.
I can design. Yes, I'll give myself some credit with that one, and
Sweet.
hopefully host a podcast as well.
Right?
Um,
That's awesome.
Are you out in LA?
No, I'm actually in Salt Lake City, Utah.
Oh, for some reason I thought LA. I think I saw that somewhere on websites,
I
but
travel, yeah, I travel a lot. I'm in California a lot. Travel there teaching. I
okay.
also travel to Costa Rica several times a year, so that's another place that I'm seen to frequent. So,
Is that because of we could say the culture of using like psychedelics? I ask that because my sister went to Costa Rica when she used like part of an ayahuasca ceremony a few years back. Does that have anything to do
yeah,
with you going to Costa Rica?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
that was really where I got interested in. I mean, I've been interested in psychedelics for a long, long time, but really cut my teeth in Costa Rica in the early 2000s, and went to a lot of ayahuasca retreats
Wow,
there.
super
So
interesting.
yeah,
We're gonna have a good
yeah,
conversation. I like to like chit chat with my guests real quick, so people can get to know them as well as I get to know you too.
yeah.
So Salt Lake City, I spent a lot of time on this beautiful place too. I flew into Salt Lake a few
Mhm.
years ago to the whole national park
Mhm.
tour down through Capitol Reef to Zion to Bryce to
Yeah.
Page, Arizona, stuff like that. So beautiful location. I'm a little jealous about that.
Oh
That's great.
yeah, that's the why we're here. We're big outdoor people. We mountain bike and hike and spend a lot of time in the desert. Yeah,
Wow.
it's why we love being here. And in the Wasatch Mountains are, I mean, I can go trail running from my house and be in the mountains in 10
Mm.
minutes, just running from my house. And then if I run the opposite direction, I'm right downtown. So it's a very unique setting to live in if you like the outdoors.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it's getting a little crowded, which is kind of not as fun.
Yeah, the national park scene has definitely, since COVID, skyrocketed. Now you got to get tickets
Yeah,
and permits way ahead of time. So yeah, that's
yeah, yeah,
definitely
yeah,
ruins a little bit of the fun. But
yeah.
Sandy, we can get rolling here.
Oh,
Really excited to have you. I'm going to
great.
take the approach of you're the master and I'm the student in this one because I have interests. I have a lot of questions. There's a lot of intrigue around this.
Yeah.
And I saw your page, your book also as well, the Theradelic approach. You're a
Mhm.
certified and licensed psychedelic trauma therapist. What I was reading your intro. It is extremely lengthy. What else? How else would you like to introduce yourself to the people listening today?
I've been in the game. I'm old now, so I've got like a lot of stuff on the
You
list.
look like you're 20.
Thank you. It's all the psychedelics.
Apparently, I'm using the wrong stuff. Jeez.
um,
That's awesome.
what do I want to say about my history? We were chatting and I started out being an artist and really interested in psychedelics for a long time. I was actually working at a video game company. I was an animator for a video game
Which
company.
one?
Acclaim, I worked at EA and EAI and Acclaim, different and different in early 90s. This is a long time ago.
Okay. I ask you that
Yeah,
because my
yeah.
wife works at Epic, if you know what Epic
Oh,
is.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
totally. That's amazing.
yeah.
Crazy. That's an interesting small world. Because, when I was there were like two women that worked there, and then the rest were like basement dweller nerds that lived with their parents, It was
Yeah.
like back in the day where it
Times have
was,
changed.
yeah, times have changed. Yeah, I was working on some of the first video games that had motion capture way back then. So that's how
Wow.
long ago it was. But, I was feeling really unfulfilled. It didn't feel like it had a sense of purpose. And I started thinking about going into psychology because I wanted to have a sense of like I was helping make the world a better place, right? So I went back to school and in psychology, and then I never thought I was going to be able to use psychedelics in my practice, but always very interested and knew the power, the incredible power for mental health before people were really talking about it, in a mainstream way. I met Rick Doblin, who runs MAPS, in 2005 at Burning Man, and he had an audience of like 30 people there. And it's so interesting because I went to psychedelic science this year, the conference in Denver, and there were 14,000 people at the conference. I just can't believe the interest and the explosion. I'm seeing it on CNN now, and I never thought that this was going to happen. So the minute I could incorporate psychedelics into my practice, ketamine being the legal psychedelic that we have right now, I immediately got trained as soon as I could in 2018 and started working with it. And now I'm a trainer. So I train other clinicians in how to be an ethical, trauma informed therapist, working with psychedelic medicines. And I host retreats. I have a clinic in Salt Lake where I work with ketamine, and I do retreats all over using, and in Costa Rica, using different plant medicines, and really excited about what's happening. So this year, I wrote a book called The Theradelic Approach, really inspired about how many people are rushing in. It's like a gold rush right now in the psychedelic movement. There's a lot of interest, and really understanding the importance of people being trauma informed and knowing how to work with these medicines in a way that creates safety. These are really powerful tools, powerful agents. And with more power comes more responsibility, right? So
Mm-hmm.
being really careful and ethical and conscientious about what we're doing is really important. And that's my passion right now, is getting people trained.
This is awesome. Okay. So I'm taking notes as you're talking. How did you know about the power of psychedelics for mental health before, I guess you can say, it started to become a little more public, if you will?
Yeah, I was traveling a lot. I've always been a big traveler, and traveling to Latin America and doing medicine ceremonies there, and totally understanding immediately how powerful they are and how incredible they were for alleviating depression and anxiety. I mean, they've been doing some research. Before they were legalized, there was research in LSD and psilocybin in the United States, in the 60s, and before they made them illegal again. Stan Grof was doing amazing research on LSD. And so I was reading a lot about these medicines and reading Aldous Huxley's books and Stan Grof's books, and really fascinated by their potential. So I knew for decades that they were powerful agents, and then didn't really think that the United States was ever going to catch up with that. From the Nixon era, again, war on drugs and Reagan and all of that. I just didn't think that was going to be a possibility. And it's really delightful that the science is informing people. The science is finally catching up and saying, no, these medicines are incredible,
Mm.
really effective. And I'm a trauma therapist, and it's so gut-wrenching to watch people suffer and not have the ability to get help that's effective. Most therapists realize how ineffective a lot of psychotropic meds are for a lot of people. It's really hard to get long-term benefit from these medicines. I mean, they work for some people, and then talk therapy it can be effective, but it's really
Mhm.
slow going and expensive. And so we have these amazing, miraculous medicines that can help us.
So when you travel all over the world, depression and anxiety for other countries, does that look like ours? Or is ours in the US different? Because I can
Yeah.
imagine, some countries perhaps aren't as wealthy or as fortunate. We have all these quote unquote first world problems that we call them, right? So I
Yeah.
can imagine depression and anxiety and perhaps other parts of the world just don't look like what we
Yeah.
have in the US.
Yeah, you see that cultures that are more socially connected have less mental illness. I'm watching this incredible epidemic rise, especially since the pandemic. We're really socially isolated, and that creates anxiety, depression, and PTSD. I love the Jiva Murti quote. It's something like, "It's no measure of sanity to be sane in an insane culture."
Huh.
And I think that's kind of what we're living in right now. Social media definitely hasn't helped.
Mhm.
And we're seeing a huge increase in suicidality, especially with young people that have been raised in social media. There's just too much social isolation. So, yes, I would say that that's the case, that in other countries there's less, but it's still an issue. Everybody's racing to become like the United States, and yet, that comes with separation from each other and modern culture, right?
Would you say the US perhaps probably has the most elevated levels of depression and anxiety that you're aware of?
Oh, I can't even imagine what the levels are in Israel and Gaza right now.
Oh my
They're
God.
much higher than us. But
Right?
yeah, I think that it's hard to say, but yeah, it's bad. It's bad here. And obviously, capitalism isn't solving the problem. Social media isn't solving the problem. Psychotropic meds aren't solving the problem. Something else is going on. And I think we really need to pull the lens back and say, wow, what's going on with us? Why are we so depressed and anxious when we're one of the wealthiest countries in the world? Why is that? You know?
I love conversations like this. Like perhaps like when I have like a functional medicine doctor on my podcast, we get to talk about like the roots of problems, not just,
Mhm.
quick fixes or trying to cure the symptoms. Right. And so
Yeah.
one of the reasons I reached out to you and I'm trying to learn more about this. I feel like we've been sheltered here in the US about learning about psychedelics and what they actually really are is as I mentioned a few years back, my sister went to Costa Rica. She did the whole ayahuasca ceremony. I didn't know anything about ayahuasca. I was like, what is this? And I started to learn more about it, have a different respect for it.
Yeah.
Aaron Rodgers is if you're familiar with who he is, he's definitely brought a light to what ayahuasca is.
Mhm.
Um, but more importantly, I think is my best friend lives in Denver. You've said Denver.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, was definitely having some mental health issues, not doing too well. I won't go too into detail without his permission, but wasn't doing very well. And I think ketamine was probably his last resort.
Mhm.
And we had some decently interesting conversations about ketamine treatment and how he basically claimed that it helped save his life. He's got a different perspective on things. And since
Yeah.
then, he's
Yeah.
actually invited others to come out to Denver to get a ketamine treatment to help them and their depression and
Mhm.
anxiety issues as well. So that's when I was like, okay, hold on a second. This is more than just like the drugs that they're kind of like perceived to be by so many of us that don't really have an understanding
Yeah.
of what this is. So that's why I was like, you know what?
Mhm.
I have this platform. I want to find someone, and I found you, thankfully, that said yes, and we can have this conversation. So you can really kind of look under the hood and what the psychedelic, what they really are, what they're
Mhm.
really good for, and we can expose this and perhaps even talk about the future of what psychedelics can do for us. So this is kind of like it's almost like near and dear to my heart, knowing how much it really helped, like basically my
Yeah.
brother. So
Yeah.
I'm just very, very thankful and happy about that.
I love hearing that. I'm so glad that he found relief. That's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. It's
Mhm.
just it helps them see the world with a different lens. Um
Yeah, I've
why
I've you know I've had over 1,000 people that I've worked with ketamine, and I see what is almost could be called miracle, miraculous uh, transformations with this medicine. It's an amazing medicine.
is it nationally allowed?
Yes. So let's talk about that for a minute. Ketamine is a Schedule 3 medicine. So Schedule 1 is, a lot of the drugs that are supposed to have no benefit and are highly addictive. Unfortunately, psilocybin and MDMA and LSD and all the major psychedelics have been put in that class totally incorrectly. Many researchers and scientists and doctors and therapists believe this is completely wrong. Based on the research that we're finding, they do have miraculous benefit. We can talk about that in a minute. But ketamine is Schedule 3. Ketamine was invented by Calvin Stevens in 1962 as an anesthetic. So ketamine has been used as anesthesia since 1962. It's an amazing medicine. It's used for premature babies in hospitals. It's used for the oldest people. It's a very, very safe medicine. And around the 90s, they started discovering that ketamine was people that were coming in for surgeries would come out and no longer be depressed and anxious. And this started, I love people that can think outside the box and start thinking, that are paying attention and saying, wow, let's look at this. So they started doing research on ketamine for psychiatric use, off-label use, psychiatric use, and found that it had this amazing ability to eliminate depression, anxiety, and PTSD symptoms. So they started using ketamine in emergency rooms for people who are acutely suicidal that would come into the emergency room for suicidality. They would give them a dose of ketamine and that would disappear. It'd be totally gone. And that was amazing. They couldn't believe it, So more and more research. And then around the mid 2010s, people started using it for psychiatric use. And the thing that's amazing about ketamine, Ryan, is that it's almost like a different drug at different doses. So at the high dose, you can have anesthesia where, it's a wisdom teeth time. You're getting your wisdom teeth taken out. Then at these lower doses, you're somewhat aware, but you're having a completely psychedelic experience. And your body is very, very relaxed, but your mind is going on all of these journeys and traveling through the universe and having these experiences. And then at lower doses, you can actually talk to someone and it's just kind of takes the edge off a little bit where you're not as anxious, you're more relaxed. And so a therapist who knows what they're doing, especially a trauma-informed therapist, can go in and do incredible work, and I'm certified in EMDR and trained in internal family systems therapy, which are trauma-informed therapies. So I can use those methodologies with a psycholytic, a low-dose ketamine, and do incredible work for people. It's like having 10 therapy sessions in one session. So yeah, ketamine's legal. You have to have a Schedule 3 license. So I work with a prescriber that has a Schedule 3 license that prescribes the ketamine. And then ketamine can be administered in different routes of administration. So not only is it different in different doses, but you can use it through different routes of administration. So, it's used in hospitals as an IV intravenously. You can use it as an intramuscular injection, which is my preferred method for my clients because for many reasons that I can talk about if you're interested. Or you can use it as a lozenge, so under the tongue, holding it in your mouth and having your oral mucosa uptake the molecule, or intranasal spray, which is Johnson & Johnson patented a version of ketamine because ketamine's out of patent. So they patented a version so they could sell it as a prescription, and it's a nasal spray with ketamine in it. It's really interesting. You can use it in a lot of different ways and a lot of different routes of administration. It's very important that it's used safely and monitored by a physician. And many of us feel that it's best to be used with therapeutic support for people who knows how to support a person who's in the psychedelic journey, because trauma can emerge.
Okay. Who would you say is like qualified to undergo a ketamine treatment? At what point do you prescribe ketamine? I'm sure you don't go from having a bad day to I'm going to hook you up on ketamine now. So at like what point along someone's therapy journey do we start looking into ketamine?
So if we go with the research has shown it to be effective for depression, especially treatment-resistant depression. So people that have tried psychotropic meds and they haven't worked, and then it's an appropriate application for anxiety, chronic anxiety, and for post-traumatic stress disorder. That's not to say, I think it's really important to say this caveat. This isn't to say that it's not good for other issues. It is good for other issues. It's just that we don't have the research yet. It's so novel. We
Mm,
haven't researched all these different applications, right? I screen out, because of the research that's available, I screen out people that have bipolar disorder, any kind of mania, history of mania. I don't have them take ketamine because the research isn't there to support people that have manic episodes. Um, I don't, there is some research on adolescents, but I don't work with kids that are under 18. So I don't work with minors. So I screen them out. And then anyone with a history of schizophrenia.
mm,
Um, Generally, and Michael Pollan talks about this in the book How to Change Your Mind, and I think many psychedelic therapists would agree, psychedelics tend to be awesome for people that have rigid thinking patterns. So people that have anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, depression, kind of that looping ruminative stuff. Psychedelics are great because it opens the mind. It creates new neuronal connections. People that tend to have disorganized thinking patterns, so people that tend toward schizophrenia or mania, tend to do not so great with psychedelics because they're already kind of disorganized. And so that exacerbates that. Does that make
mm.
sense? And that's
It
like
does.
a general classification, but that's kind of a general guideline that, we follow.
How would it work for people that don't like to lose control? I feel like I consider
Mm.
myself a high achiever. I am somebody who's rigid. I am very much on
Psychedelics would be
schedule.
great for you.
I like routine. I would say the most nervous part I would be about a psychedelic is just like letting go of control and not knowing where my mind is going to take me.
I love this. Okay, so let's dive into this because this is one of my beloved
Okay.
topics.
Okay.
Internal family systems talks about us as having many, many different parts. Okay. So we have these different classifications of parts. We have parts of our person. So we're not just one person, we're many people, right? So we all have parts. We have these parts called protectors or managers, and they like to keep the show on the road. They like to keep us functioning, showing up at work every day, brushing our teeth, doing everything we're supposed to do. Sometimes protectors can get kind of extreme and do things like addiction or OCD or things like that. Okay, so think about that classification. And then behind the protectors are exiles, and exiles are very vulnerable parts. It's kind of like what we classically think of as the inner child. These are parts that have been hurt and damaged and are very vulnerable and scared. Okay, and then sometimes we have inner children that are happy and playful, but sometimes we have exiles that are scared. And the protectors are always paired with the exiles, right? There's the exile and then there's a protector. So the protector wants to control everything all the time. And then there's a younger part that inside that's scared. So like think about this question that you have in those terms, okay? So when I'm working with someone that has issues with control, and I'm definitely a person like that too. I'm a
Mhm.
high achiever, very driven, love to have everything organized. I like to titrate into the experience by talking to those protector parts of their psyche and working with them and saying, are you ready? What does it mean to you to lose control? What would happen if we had access to that vulnerable part of you? Because the protectors get put to sleep on psychedelics.
Mhm.
They cannot maintain the control of the system. They're disabled. They come back online after. But if you rush in as a therapist or facilitator too fast and you don't get that consent from those protector parts, there's going to be all kinds of backlash. Those protectors are going to wake up after the session and say, what did you do? You exposed us to too much. We were too vulnerable. That was too overwhelming. And so I use that as a guideline. If you came to see me, Ryan, and you told me what you just told me, I'm really afraid to let go.
Mhm.
We would do therapy around that before we would ever do ketamine, because
Mm.
I would not want to rush into stripping away your protective system and forcing you to be vulnerable because you're not ready for that, right? So what we might do is have a few sessions where you and I talk, and I talk to your protectors, and they're like, okay, I think I'm ready. I want to try this. And then we would do a very low dose of ketamine. And so your protector system would be just a little offline, but they would still be around and kind of watching and making sure you were safe.
Mm.
Okay, so then we would talk and see how that felt. Okay, yeah, that was okay. I think I'm ready to go deeper. Okay, then the next session will go deeper. And I have found that front loading the therapy in this way creates a lot of safety and gets a lot more done in less time. And this is one of the reasons why I wrote the Faradelic approach, because people were having this idea about ego dissolution. Oh, take a ton of psychedelics and strip away your ego. You need to get rid of your ego, man. This terrifies our system. Our system
Hmm.
is like, what? I don't want that. I don't want to, I don't want to be terrified and afraid. And this is not a way to do it consensually. You need to get every part of you on board to make sure the system feels safe before you proceed. Very, very important. And this is why we need this holding to take you through the process. I will tell you that for many people, when you are ready to have a deep experience, when you have an experience where all of that protection system is relaxed and you are merged with and connected to everything and connected to what feels like the divine, it is the most soothing feeling that you don't have to be in control of everything all the time and that the universe has your back. That is the most amazing thing for people that have issues of control, because those protectors think they're running everything and no one has their back. And when they are experiencing something that is so profound and connected like that, it's a life-changing experience. You never go back once you have that experience. It's amazing.
You
But
never
you
go
have to be ready.
back.
You never go back to that same amount of fear and control.
Wow. Do you realize that in the middle of the trip, or is it like afterwards you look back and reflect?
When you have an experience like that and you have no reference point for having had that experience before, there's no word. It's called ineffable. There is no words that can capture that feeling. It's absolutely exquisite. So you realize it when you're there, but sometimes you're so there that you don't even realize that there's this thing happening, this little animal body that's in the meat world. It's like that's not
Yeah.
even relevant anymore while you're there. But when you come back, once you know, you can't unknow. So you come back and there's a reference point, a compass.
Hmm.
And this is another thing that's really important. So I talked about the preparation phase, right, of psychedelics, but on the back end of that, there's this amazing process of metabolizing what you experience, and that's called integration. And you go to the peak of the mountain and you look out over all the landscape out and can see for miles, but you can't stay at the peak of the mountain forever. You have to walk down the mountain back to your village, right? And that's the process of integrating these expansive experiences and really saying, how am I going to take that and apply that to my daily life?
Hmm.
And this was really something that was really um, present for me when I was doing these experiences in Costa Rica and seeing these folks that were coming down and having their minds blown and then had to go back to their cubicle in Indiana on Monday. Just like, what do I do with that?
Yeah.
So that's a whole important process too.
Okay. There's 10 different ways I want to go with this. For somebody that has depression or anxiety that comes in and sees you, what is it that helps them or relieves them of their depression? Are they seeing something? Is something happening in their brain? What is
Yeah,
it that makes it click?
it's polyvalent. There's a lot of things.
Okay.
So there's a story that's happening, this amazing thing, and then what story do you make of it? And there's some brain chemistry stuff. So let's talk about the brain chemistry stuff. And a lot of the research is about that because that's what our culture loves to focus on is that kind of stuff. So let's talk about that.
Hmm.
And you don't have to talk about woo. We can talk about
I,
we can
I want
talk
I
about
like
this.
it all, honestly. I'm
Right, me
interested.
too. Me too.
So.
I love science and art, right? I love both. So ketamine is unique and different than other psychedelic medicines. Most of the classic psychedelics work on the 5-HT2A receptor sites. That's the serotonergic receptor sites. And that's what serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, work on, right? That's why you can't be on SSRIs if you do ayahuasca, psilocybin, any of that,
Mm.
MDMA. Um, Ketamine works on the NMDA receptors. Totally different system. And that's why we can see people that are on psychotropic meds and take ketamine, which is great for a lot of people that are already on meds. So the NMDA receptors, or it's the GABAergic receptor system, kappa opioid receptor system, and it's very soothing to the brainstem. When you're in the ketamine experience, it force shuts down the right amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain. So it really is soothing for the brain. It just takes you out of anxiety. I've done little experiments on myself when I've been in ketamine journeys where I try to scare myself and I just can't. I can't scare myself. It's
No
like,
kidding.
it's weird. Um, so that's the way it works in the brain. And then it releases this huge amount of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which creates all of these new neurons and dendritic connections for days after. And particularly if you don't drink alcohol after having a ketamine experience for several, like at least a week after, it really encourages the growth of new neurons. So it kind of loosens those neurons, it soothes the brain, and then it reconnects them in a way that's less anxious, less depressed. So people that have a mid to high dose ketamine journey usually experience alleviation of depression, anxiety for 3 days up to 2 weeks. Sometimes if you have really good therapy with new thought patterns, it can last months. So that's the way that it works chemically in the brain. There's another component that I've noticed where, and I talk about this a lot in my book, this kind of storytelling aspect. Are you familiar with the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell?
I don't think so. No.
So the hero's journey is that, if you think about Star Wars or any story, it follows the hero's journey where
Hmm.
there's the hero's call to adventure, faces the dragon, faces Darth Vader, whatever, triumphs, and then, yay, I won, and then goes back to the village and brings something back. There's something that happens in the psychedelic experience that replicates that hero's journey or heroine's journey, if I like to frame it for women too, where we face our fears. You were talking about letting go of control, facing your fears of release, conquering that fear. Oh, I've survived. I did it. Come back and tell the story.
Hmm.
And the way that ketamine works in the brain, we're able, because of those NMDA receptors, and it downregulates your time sense, it forces the brain to this observer mind where you're able to watch the story of your life with distance. Fascinating. You're like in this expanded state watching your life
That's
and
what
all
I've
this.
heard. What does that look like? My buddy told me that, but I still don't quite grasp it.
It's the way that it works in the receptors, which is so cool, but it's like you're not merged with your story. In IFS, we would say you're in highest self energy and you're watching your parts in their story, right? Your protectors and exiles. And that's why IFS is so awesome to work with ketamine, because you can give language to this. But it's amazing. You're just in this expanded state, like almost like you're meditating in this expanded state, and you're just watching all like, oh, that's so funny that when my wife says that and I get all triggered that I do that thing. That's so interesting that I do that. I wonder if I want to keep doing that. I wonder if I need to be controlling my kids so much, in his baseball game. I wonder if I could just like love him for giving it a shot and trying his best. There are all these things that happen. It's amazing.
So do you see like a highlight reel of like your past life and you're watching it again from outside perspective?
Can, yeah, can. Yeah, it can be very symbolic. You can be shown. I had a client that she was really into nature, and she would have all these things about seeing trees. She would go and lean up against a tree and the trunk would be like her spine. And she saw that as like when she's in alignment and she's rooted in the ground, grounded, and her head is like in expansion. So that was a symbol for her of being aligned and calm. She saw these pine cones and thought of that as like her inner child. So it can show you this really interesting symbolic material that you can then interpret, kind of like dream interpretation. It's like
Yeah.
that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had this really great session once where this woman, she was like stuck on a wall in her ketamine journey, and she was freaking out because she couldn't get unstuck from this wall, and she was just sliding along this wall. And because I'm, trained in IFS, I was like, oh, I wonder, internally I'm thinking, oh, this is a protector that doesn't want her to go deeper. So I started asking her about that, like, oh, tell me about the wall. Can you see that that's a part of you and not really you? It's like a part that doesn't want you to go deeper. And then all of a sudden, she was able to see a little window open up in the wall. Oh, interesting. Here's a window. What's inside the window? Oh, I can see a little girl in a courtyard. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so this is like her inner child that she can see in this courtyard, right?
Wow.
So it's amazing how, I mean, it's really incredible what is shown to you. And it's just like a dream where it's really symbolic sometimes, right? And if you have a
So
therapist that knows what you're doing, they can help you uncover what that meant, you
I was
know?
just going to ask you that. So you're right there. Let's just pretend, let's just use me
Mhm.
as an example, right? I'm sitting in a
Mhm.
chair. You said you're going to put, is an IV or a shot in my arm?
Yeah,
How
so I'm
does,
giving you, well, I'm not, my physician is giving you an injection of ketamine.
okay. And so I'm sitting there. Is it like a dark room? Do I have a blindfold on? Do I have anything
Mhm.
on? Yeah.
Yeah, and I have some great music for you. And let's say it's a mid
Okay.
dose journey.
Let's
Okay.
say it's a mid dose.
Yeah.
Um, how many minutes until I'm like, oh crap, something's starting to happen now?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is great. So I've determined what your great dose is. My physician and I have worked together. I've done a bunch of sessions with you to get you ready. You're ready to go deep. So what I like to do is give you a meditation first, and I weave in. This is one of my favorite ways to be creative with stuff. Based on what you and I have talked about, I weave in a meditation for you that's about 10 minutes. So I'm like, okay, Ryan, you're breathing and relaxing, and we're going to work on, getting really curious about these control, like how you like to be in control in your life and how you feel really compelled to achieve. And you've told me that this is what you want to work on. So I
Mhm.
make a little meditation for you. In about 10 minutes, you start to feel the medicine coming on. It feels for a lot of people like you have this like really amazing body experience where it's like, oh,
So it
okay,
feels good. Is
relax.
there ever any
Feels really
panic
good.
moments for people?
Yeah, for some people, that feeling of letting go is really foreign and they start to get nervous, right? Start to,
Right.
so some people and so then I'm breathing with them, okay, you're safe, everything's fine. And you have this amazing music. Music is incredibly important in these journeys. It's like the tether that keeps you, that you hold on to through the journey. And
It's
and
like
I've
Inception. You ever watch Inception where like they play the
yes,
music to wake you up?
totally.
All
Well,
right.
I created music with David Starfire, who's an amazing music producer, and he and I co-created a lot of music for ketamine journeys to
Wow.
help lead people through. So the music is starting to like build up, and then after about 10 minutes, I'm quiet, and you just have your eye shades on, and you're just going in your journey. And I'm there with you every second. If you want me to hold your hand, if you're scared, if you want to talk. Most people don't talk in those deeper journeys because they're so deep, they're not even connected to their body
I
anymore.
was gonna say, am I telling you what I'm seeing or
Some
you
people
don't
do,
know?
but yeah, I had a cute guy a couple of weeks ago. He's like 75 and never taken any psychedelics, and the whole time he was like, I'm in heaven. This is beautiful. He was so scared, and then he was like in bliss. Um, it was really great. He had a delightful. It really helped him make peace with death was his theme.
Oh
So
wow.
anyway, so you're doing this amazing journey, seeing all this stuff. If the signature, each psychedelic has its own signature, and the signature of ketamine is movement. So that's why the music helps because you're moving along. So about 75% of people have visual experience. Some people have a total somatic experience, just body sensations. They don't really see a lot. About 25% of people have a very sensual experience. So it's kind of like MDMA, where they feel like, oh, my body feels really good.
Hmm.
Not everybody, but 25%. So, most people have like visual experience of flying or being taffy, or it can be anything, or memories of your past, seeing people who have died come and talk to you. That's a common experience. Um, all kinds of stuff. And then after about 45 minutes, you start to feel like you're coming back into your body. So people kind of usually start kind of moving their hands and shifting around because they're like, oh yeah, I have a human body. I
Mm.
forgot that I have a human
Hmm.
body, and my name's Ryan and I'm back in my body. And then there's about an hour of really lovely, open heart, calm energy. Usually some people come back and they're upset, but usually people are very calm and serene. And I call that hour after the journey, the golden hour, because you can do a lot of amazing therapy because your protector system isn't back totally online and you're very open, and we can go in and I'll come back and I'll say, so you're starting to feel like you're coming back. And if you're responsive, you feel like talking at all. And then we start processing. So I say,
Mm.
what did you see, Ryan? What did you experience? Oh, I saw, I was running with wolves and we were going over the snow tundra and oh, interesting. Like, what do you think
That's
that?
something I would actually. Where did you get? Wolves are my
I'm
favorite
kind of
animal,
psychic.
so
I'm a little psychic,
I have
It's
three
also the
huskies.
ketamine.
I have
That's awesome.
I have three huskies because I loved wolves growing up. So I find that really really interesting.
Hang out with me. You'll find we don't even
That's a
need the ketamine.
possibility. That's wow. Wow. Okay. I just had a
So
psychic on my last episode, so I'm already mind blown. This is crazy. This is awesome.
yeah, so then we would look at what those symbols were, what that meant for you, the importance of that, and really talking about, okay, you really thought a lot about, how you want to be more calm in your life and just more open to new experiences. How do you want to apply that to your daily life? What would that look like going forward? Let's kind of talk about that at the end.
So you have
And
to
then,
interpret what someone says. Do you have usually are successful in doing so, or does that ever like throw you for a loop sometimes?
well, I really like to have my clients direct what that meaning is because that meaning is different for everyone.
Hmm.
For example, I love snakes. I think snakes are amazing. And so when
Oh,
snakes show up for me, it's like, oh, beautiful. It's a sign of evolution and shedding skin and becoming more expansive. For other people like you, snakes are terrifying. I don't want snakes in my journey.
oh, wake me
So
up.
like wolves, for example, some people don't like wolves, and
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, what is that meaning for you? So I'm letting you lead the meaning and just kind of midwifing the meaning, and then checking in the day after. So tomorrow, send me an email, or we'll have an appointment or a call, and just like, okay, how are you doing? How is that? Do you notice any change in your mood?
What do people usually say? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I hate to make blanket statements because, it depends on what your diagnosis is, your history, but ketamine's really effective. It's really a great medicine.
What are the chances it's like a one stop and you're good to go, or is it more of like a maintenance program? Does that depend on the person?
Depends on the person. You know, it's interesting in the 70s and 80s and 90s, psychedelics were demonized. It was like, you're gonna fry your brain like
Yeah.
fried eggs in a pan,
Why is this so vilified? If you can like take a
right?
second to go into
Well,
that,
yeah,
because we've all
I'll
been taught
circle.
wrong.
Yeah, I'll circle back on that for sure. I'd love to talk about that. But there was that. And then now we've got books like How to Change Your Mind, and people have this idea that they're going to take psychedelics once and they're going to be cured of anything.
Hmm.
And that's a problem too. It's not a panacea. Um, so it can be life-changing after one experience, but most people need to have a practice with these things, not like psychotropic meds where you take them every day, but most people need a few sessions to have enduring change. Some people need to do ketamine, every 2 weeks for long term, and then take a break and then reassess and might have to come back, So some
Mhm.
of my clients are prescribed a low dose ketamine lozenge to use once or twice a week at home on their own, really low dose, just to maintain and take the edge off of anxiety. So the prescriber that I work with likes to do that to help them have kind of a more of a baseline, less anxiety.
Is that a temporary solution, or is this like you're going to be on this lozenge for foreseeable future?
What I've found in my clinic is that people tend to start forgetting to take it and then they don't need it as much anymore.
Huh.
And then we taper them off. It's a different paradigm than what we're used to with the pharmaceutical companies, taking a drug every day. It's a different paradigm altogether,
Well,
right? The
yeah,
idea is
because
to get healthy and not need it.
I love that. Yeah, I asked that because that's exactly what came to mind is like taking a pill every day. And, there's the pharmaceuticals, there's all these side effects that are, you see the damn commercials side effects are suicidal
Oh, yeah.
thoughts, internal bleeding, all that stuff. It's like,
Right?
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ, like, no thanks.
totally. Yeah. Yeah, totally. I agree. Yeah.
That's crazy. I think something else that comes over, I want to hit on a few more things if that's cool. The control thing definitely comes back to my mind. Have you ever done or studied hypnotherapy at all?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
I so my first year doing this podcast a few years ago, it was something I was interested in doing. And I actually had a session afterwards after I did the podcast. I was in the grieving process with my dog, Coda, who passed away.
Mhm.
And I was probably 5 or 6 months past that or whatever. And I thought I was fine. And I went into this hypnotherapy session and I woke up just absolutely in tears.
Yeah.
Took me to a place that I wasn't really ready to go to.
Mhm. Yeah.
Would definitely concern me to like hop under another, let's just say, state of mind, I guess you will. And
Yeah.
then talking to my sister who did ayahuasca, she had a very harrowing trip,
Mhm.
pretty
Yeah.
terrifying, she said. So
Mhm.
that's one of those things where it's like you hear these amazing things, but also it's like it's also scary too. Like I said, to lose control and to be afraid that you're going to be experiencing the most terrifying thing you've ever experienced. I don't know
Absolutely.
if does that happen? The chance is low. Like what happens if that happens too?
Um, I mean, definitely had harrowing experiences and I've had the most blissful experiences of my life, right? So
Mm,
it's an interesting conversation because, we're labeling it as good or bad. And I
mm. Hmm.
I
That's
think a
true.
lot of it is the set and setting, how prepared you are, how well your facilitators facilitate the experience. If you have a terrifying experience, are they helping you integrate that for meaning about why that was produced, what you can do with that material? Stan Groff had this really great quote. He said, "The acute experiencing of a negative emotion is the funeral pyre of that emotion."
Mm,
Right? Like when we think about the word emotion, it's energy moving. And the idea is to keep that energy moving through. So if you have grief stuck in your body and your psyche and you haven't processed that grief is going to come up the minute it's given an opportunity. You won't stay in the grief forever, but the grief wants to be felt. It wants to get your attention. It wants you to stay with it and
mm,
experience it.
mm,
So could you say that's a bad experience? I don't know. It's like it needs to happen. I think of it like if you have a sliver and an infection and then you have a big scar tissue over it, is it good just to leave that there forever? Or is it good for you to go in and make an incision and take out the sliver and take out all that infection and then sew it up?
mm.
That's how I think about trauma. It stays in our body until we release it. I had a client the other day that has forgotten about a trauma, a sexual trauma from when she was 5 her entire life. And she had all these crazy symptoms that were pointing to that anorexia, a fugue state where she had amnesia, all of these issues, terrified of being alone, checking her doors all the time. All of these
Wow.
things were pointing to that. And then she uncovered that, felt it. It was horrible. It was intense. And now it's moving through and she's feeling more embodied, more aware, not afraid to go places anymore, not having amnesia, you know? So I really trust the process and I trust the medicines. However, it's very important that whoever is working with those medicines and facilitating the experience knows how to work with that so that it doesn't become a re-traumatizing experience, that it can be metabolized in a meaningful way, right?
Yeah. That is, yeah, the way you're saying that, you want to feel very safe and secure with the person that you're talking to is in the room with you.
Yeah.
With someone like her that you just mentioned, where did ketamine fall along the process for her? Was it like early, or has she been going through like years of therapy, medication? It just wasn't working, and then we finally got to ketamine, or where does
Yeah.
ketamine
Yeah.
usually fall in this process?
Yeah. I mean, I had been seeing her for a long time for therapy, a couple of years before it felt like she was ready to go on that journey. So really listening and paying attention to when the client is ready for that, it just wasn't ready.
What are some
So
telltale signs that someone's ready to take that
working with
step?
those protectors that,
Yeah.
are ready to, you know, we had to do a lot of trauma work first about other situations that were happening in her family of origin and other things. So there was a lot of that front end work.
This is super interesting because
Yeah.
I've been going to therapy now for a little over a year. Very happy to say I go with my wife, not because of relationship issues, but more of like solving issues before they become issues, which is
That's a
awesome,
great idea. Yeah,
right?
that's a very smart thing to do.
That's what I was told a few years back, and multiple people said that. I was like, I'm not above that. I'm all about that. I know I'm not perfect. I come with my baggage, and it's definitely opened up the doors on quite a few things about what's happened in my childhood. And my wife
Mm.
and I openly do, and her too. It's all about the environment you grew up in, but we do openly talk about, do you react like this because so and so happened when you were a kid, because so and so said this when you were a kid, or they treated you this way and stuff like that. And now it's like kind of starting to click a little bit. Um,
Good. Yeah.
a
Isn't
lot
it
of
amazing?
a lot of shame and a lot of guilt. Do you deal with people that deal with a lot of those two
Oh,
symptoms?
I think that's like the underlying emotion for most things, right? For most problems. It's interesting that you bring that up. I was before I became a trauma informed therapist, I studied with John and Julie Gottman in the Gottman method, which is a relationship psychology. He's a really renowned relationship psychologist, really well researched. And I was working with couples, and one or both of them would just shut down, and I would be trying to get them to connect, and they wouldn't connect anymore. And I realized, oh, this isn't a thinking error. This is trauma from childhood or from past relationships, and they're flooded and they cannot connect anymore. There's no
Mm,
relating right now.
mm.
And so that was what really got me interested in getting trained in trauma therapy, because I couldn't help these clients when they would get into that space where relationally they were so triggered by each other, they were just in a trauma response.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's more of things started to come to light when I would say something and I would get some weird reaction, or she would say something and I would give some reaction. It's just kind of like, why, what? So it's just the weirdest things. I was like, why would
Yeah.
that be the response? Right. And she hates the fact that I ask why all the time, but it's like, I want to know how to steer clear of some of this stuff or to
Mhm.
understand it so I can, avoid it. So yeah, it's been a game changer before we actually really knew it
Yeah.
needed to be a game changer. So I highly recommend
Mhm.
that.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah, it's been a wonderful experience. It's just also life can be slightly more difficult on occasion when your eyes are open up even more to the family issues that are still
Right.
your family. And now we don't need to get into this, but now it's like I've been told to set boundaries and I'm having a really hard time with setting boundaries. We don't need to get into
Mhm.
this, but do you have experience as far as like having people set boundaries?
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it's like this thing about how much you're going to be agreeable, how much you're going to take care of yourself. It's that, the Freudian ideas of the superego and the id. Like, how much are you going to gratify your own selfishness, and how much are you going to take care of other people? And then you're kind of balancing those two extremes in the center, right?
Hmm.
And it's tricky in long-term relationships. This is like the painting that we were talking about, the first that my husband and I painted together. That's a great exercise in that. How much do I want to assert myself and paint over his stuff? How much does he paint over my stuff? How do
Huh.
we play this game of boundaries and allowing and feeling into that game with each other? It's an ongoing process. How much space am I going to take up? How much am I going to let him take up?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things I try to stay positive. I try to have a positive mindset and they say, get rid of the negative people around you.
Mhm.
Easier said than done. Much easier said when it's not your family. So, and
Yep.
not only just that, we're having our first child in March. So there comes more issues, but also more of a need to set boundaries.
Yeah.
I think what I'm getting at is like, when can I sign up for a ketamine treatment?
That's great.
Jesus, now I'm just talking out loud here, just blurbing into the
We're just
microphone.
like giving you a therapy session right now. That's great. I love
Oh
that.
man, but in all honesty, like not just necessarily me, like how does you're awesome. Like you're awesome to talk to. I want to have you on multiple podcasts, but
Thanks.
for people listening to this, they're actually like, I really like her. I want to work with her and talk to her. How is that possible? Do they have to be in Utah? Like, what's the whole scenario for that?
Yeah, and I'm not seeing a lot of individual clients right now. I do retreats in Salt Lake once a month, approximately once a month, that are ketamine group retreats. I'm teaching a lot these days and training people with the books. But yeah, I keep a small clinical practice. I'm licensed in Maryland too, so I see clients there and work with people hosting retreats and being a guest teacher at retreats in other states. So when I'm hosting retreats in other states, but yeah, it's more probably reading the book, and I'm going to be releasing another book for people
Nice.
that are interested in psychedelics next year. My audio book comes out in a couple of weeks, which I'm really excited about.
I'm getting that. I'm an audio person. I like to
Me
drive. I
too.
like to run and
Me
listen.
too. Yeah,
I just
I'm
listened to
with you.
Michael Pollan. What's his first book? I forget what it is. I was listening to that when I was doing yard work and stuff. So I was like,
Oh yeah,
audiobooks,
yeah, yeah,
way for me to
yeah,
go.
yeah.
Um, I want to touch on, I don't want to keep holding you, but I want to touch on why psychedelics were vilified and how we're starting to kind of like lift that a little bit. Cause I know it's really important to you in the future of psychedelics. And we need to get this in the hands of people that actually really need healing.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, there are a lot of theories about this. The hippies were dropping acid and not wanting to go to the Vietnam War. And I think that really pissed off Richard Nixon, because he
Mm,
wanted more cannon fodder to send to Vietnam.
mm,
So I think that was probably initially, it was just like really disruptive to the social system, and I think the powers that be weren't into that. Psychedelics really do make people feel like they have a direct connection to the divine, and they don't need to go along with authority if it doesn't seem ethical or whatever. So I think that can cause some problems for
mm.
people that like power and control. um yeah, and I think there was just a misunderstanding about their potential. They just got grouped in with heroin and cocaine and all those drugs that are really highly addictive. um Psilocybin and other psychedelics like that are not addictive. They're super low on the addictive scale, lower than caffeine, way lower than alcohol. So we're not seeing addiction potential with those. Ketamine's a little higher than psilocybin and MDMA, just a little bit, but it's still way less than other
Is it
medicines.
some kind of a brain addiction, or is it like I feel so freaking good, I can't wait to do this again? Like,
That's probably more that. And it's
yeah.
more the snorting it, where they're seeing that there's more addiction potential with snorting it.
Huh.
I don't like the nasal spray and that route of administration. I don't think that's the most effective. There's some there's some speculation if it's binding to the GABAergic receptors, like cocaine, more in the uh, frontal lobe area. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's the case, but ketamine's still super low addiction potential compared to other drugs.
Mm.
So I think that there was a fear, they got lumped, and they just didn't. There was an ignorance about them. There's so much evidence that we have that they're effective. Like, Johns Hopkins did a study with psilocybin for people that were dying of cancer, and it was something like 80% of people had no fear of death after one psilocybin treatment, and they were still feeling that way 6 months after treatment. you know, MDMA study, the MAP1 study, 88% of the participants no longer met the clinical criteria for PTSD after
Mm.
their treatment. 67% no longer like fit the classification for PTSD in follow-up session. I mean, it's amazing. Um, so we're seeing really a lot of effectiveness that is so much better than any psychotropic medication for these psychedelic medicines. So it's really important that we keep pushing on the front of getting them legalized and getting help to people. And luckily the VA that is really backing treatment for veterans with MDMA, and now we're looking at ibogaine. There was a huge um, amount of money that was allocated from opioid addiction in
Mhm.
Kentucky for ibogaine research recently. So people are waking up. Colorado legalized or decriminalized psilocybin. Oregon decriminalized psilocybin. Many cities have done the same, like Oakland and Santa Cruz. So we're looking at that more and more, and it feels really hopeful. We're hoping that MDMA is fully rescheduled at either the end of 2024 or 2025. Psilocybin is in expanded access and research, so we're hoping 2025 for that to come through. So there's a lot of light on the horizon. I just wish that it was faster because people really need help right now. A lot of people are suffering, and we need to get help to people.
Sometimes it takes forever to just unlearn things that we were taught improperly. I talk about diet and stuff all the time on this podcast and how we were just taught just the complete wrong things. The
Mhm.
food pyramid I bring up all the time. We used to eat
Yeah,
pure sugar cereals at 8
yeah,
a.m. as a kid growing up. Like,
yeah, exactly.
are you kidding me?
It's
Like,
the worst, right? It's
it's
the worst.
so bad. It's honestly, it's so freaking frustrating. Like, I love living here in America, but it's like we are so slow to adapt sometimes.
Yeah,
It just drives me nuts. What's in your
yeah.
travels, what's the most like forward thinking or progressive country that you've visited?
I did a residency at Synthesis in the Netherlands, outside of
Mm,
Amsterdam, and that's a pretty amazing culture. They have all drugs are legal there,
mm.
and they have support for people that have heroin addiction. Instead of punishing them and putting them in jail, they're helping them with treatment, instead. So, it's really progressive, and psilocybin's legal there. So, they have these beautiful retreat centers and giving people support with the truffles. The truffles are legal there.
Oh wow.
So yeah, there are a lot of places that are pretty progressive and that kind of thing. But the United States is really leading the research in psychedelics for sure,
That's great.
which is surprising, but it's great. And, I was just talking, a guy reached out to me that wanted me on a podcast in the UK, and then he found out he couldn't talk about it because they're not, psychedelics aren't okay, for their, so, we at least can talk about it now, and there's research happening. So that's hopeful.
You can always just send them mine. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. um, no, this has just been I was just like I'm at a loss of words sometimes. This is just a fascinating conversation. I'm learning
Yeah, I
so much
agree.
talking to you, which I love, and I imagine so many of us are because, like I said, we either were taught the wrong things or just not taught at all from a sheltered perspective.
Mhm.
Psychedelics is like, ooh, don't do that. You're bad, like stay away from this stuff,
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's really nice to have like a complete understanding of what's going on here, what it's good for. Obviously, there's ways to abuse it. Um,
Mhm.
but there really is, like I said, I talked to my buddy, really opened my eyes when it was like, dude, there's so much benefit to this. And now it's
Mhm.
helping save my
Yeah.
life and so many other people's lives. It's like, all right, I gotta learn more about this. And that's when I picked up
Yeah.
Michael Pollan's book. That's when I found you. And now we're having this conversation. So
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm happy
I'm
to
so
be that
thankful.
ambassador, ambassador for psychedelics.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I'm so thankful. So when does your book come out on Audible?
Yeah, sometime in December, I think in the next couple of weeks. So it should be available by the end of the year. And then I'm initializing several training programs next year on momentum and TPN, and teaching all over the place next year. So
And
just watch for
do you
me.
have another book coming out? Is that what you said?
I'm starting to write my second book, but I don't have a title or a release date for it. But I'm definitely trying to carve out time to make that happen. I got a
That's
lot going
awesome.
on.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm gonna pay attention to when your Audible book comes out. I'll post that for you as well.
Great, thanks, Ryan.
Where can people follow you on social and find you on your website?
On all the socials, I'm Sunny Strasburg LMFT, on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. And then Sunny Strasburg Therapy is my website. You can follow me there and sign up for my newsletter. I announce all the stuff I'm up to on my newsletter that's on that website.
This is fantastic. I'm going to link all of your links in the show notes so people can just scroll down and just click on it and find you, follow you.
Great.
I'm signing up for your newsletter
Good.
immediately.
Okay.
I
Yeah, come to a retreat.
I would love to. I really feel like honored and privileged to talk to you. This is just an amazing conversation.
Thank you,
Um,
Ryan.
very grateful for you to come on and explain this, and you've been so amazing with it. So
Thanks. Thank
thank
you.
you so much.
Appreciate
Anytime. There's a
it.
lot to learn still. So Sunny,
Yeah.
happy holidays.
Yeah, you too.
Have an amazing new year as well. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much.